Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. Throughout this 1 hour royal extravaganza, we'll be offering you at home unrivaled access to the Platinum Pageant. So do stay tuned. Each act from the pageant will tell the story of the Queen's 70-year reign in 4 acts. And speaking of rain, there's quite a lot of it about at the moment, but hopefully we won't receive any climate change lectures that we saw last night, folks, at that brilliant concert. But first, here's the news with Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. It's just after 3 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Celebrations are underway across the country on the final day of Jubilee celebrations for the Queen. In central London, a 2-mile-long carnival procession has begun, involving some 10,000 people, as well as the gold state coach, which carried the Queen to her coronation. The procession began at Horse Guards Parade and is heading down the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And it's hoped Her Majesty the Queen will make an appearance on the palace balcony to round off the weekend celebrations. Meanwhile, millions have gathered for street parties across the country, with more than 85,000 big Jubilee lunches being held. Many street parties are in full swing, with bunting and dancing well underway. This was in Castle Donington in Leicestershire, just one of many celebrations happening across the country today. Well, Cardiff residents have had the chance to try out some cakes baked by the Duchess of Cambridge and her 3 children. Pictures posted on William and Kate's official Twitter account show Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis all baking cupcakes, which have been handed out at a street party in the city today. Other news now, and the Prime Minister will this week update the country on how the NHS is dealing with the COVID-19 backlog. Boris Johnson described work being done by the government as the NHS's biggest ever catch-up programme. Meanwhile, Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the government is putting more money into health and social care than any other has done before, but that there is no quick fix. Tube services across the capital will be severely disrupted tomorrow because of a strike by thousands of workers in a dispute over jobs and pensions. Transport for London is advising people to avoid travelling as members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union will walk out for 24 hours. Many stations, especially those in central and south London, will be closed, while stations that can be opened may only operate for limited periods. Russia claims to have destroyed tanks provided to Ukraine by European countries. The statement comes after Kiev was rocked by several explosions after a relatively calm couple of weeks in the capital. Smoke could be seen drifting over the city early this morning as emergency services responded to incidents in 2 separate districts. At least 1 person has been taken to hospital. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have been on the counter-attack in the city of Severodonetsk over the last 24 hours. The UK's Ministry of Defence says they've been able to slow Putin's momentum in the east of the country. Intelligence chiefs say Russian troops are poorly trained and lack resources. The governor of Luhansk says control of the city is now split 50-50. At least 41 people have died and more than 150 have been injured after a fire swept through a container depot in Bangladesh. The fire triggered a huge blast and multiple explosions. It's not yet clear what caused the blaze, although officials say they suspect it may have originated from a container of hydrogen peroxide. Firefighters say containers filled with chemicals are still exploding. Wales will be making no concessions against Ukraine as they face off in the World Cup playoffs in Cardiff later. Captain Gareth Bale says he'll make no apology if his squad denies Ukraine its World Cup dreams. The winner of the match will take the final spot in the competition in Qatar later this year. Wales has not played at a World Cup since 1958. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Darren.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, folks, in just a moment, we're going to be going live to watch the latest Platinum Pageant goings-on, bringing together, of course, street art, theatre, music, circus, carnival, all to celebrate Her Majesty's love of the natural world and all of the nations of the Commonwealth. But first, I have a very special guest with me today to help guide us through the many different performances and the spectacular sights that we're seeing on screen. I'd like to say that with me is the historian and author and broadcaster, Dr. Zaria Masani. He's also on the advisory board of the Oxford Ethics and Empire Project. Zaria, thank you for your company. What have you enjoyed so far over this weekend? What have you enjoyed seeing the most? Did you watch the concert last night?
I watched a bit of it.
Yeah.
Not a huge amount, since I'm afraid I'm a classical music fan, so there was only some.
Right, yes.
But I suppose the highlight of the day for me was the Queen's appearance with Paddington Bear.
Yeah.
And she has this amazing sort of combination of majesty and aloofness, but also the very human side, which came across. I think that's the secret of the monarchy.
It was quite touching. A lot of people were incredibly moved by that animation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for a while, one couldn't believe that it was real.
Yes.
And then you realise it was her.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do you think, have there been elements of, because I know you've been chronicling over the past few years at least, a lot of resentment towards, I think, our nation and our nation's flag. Do you think this is the moment in which we've all rallied around the flag, as it were, and actually what it means to be British, our values, all embodied within the Crown and Her Majesty the Queen? This is a real moment for celebration, and I genuinely feel quite heartened by the public's response.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it has been pretty overwhelming. I mean, if I were a Republican, which I'm not, I would be really dismayed because it shows how insignificant that, opinion is in Britain today. I mean, most people overwhelmingly, I think, celebrate the Queen and the monarchy. What will be interesting is how far that continues down the line, because what was very encouraging about this Jubilee was how the Queen very much indicated her succession with Prince Charles and then Prince William and Prince George and Princess Charlotte, still growing up. So I think that it certainly did confirm that there would be tremendous continuity. And I think it's the continuity that is really important for the British public because, we have had a lot of doomsayers and gloomsayers. And I think the political situation has been very fragmented along this moment as well.
Yeah.
So we don't know if we'll have the same government in a week's time.
Well, that's true.
But we will have the same Queen.
Yeah.
So I think that is very reassuring.
And thank God, it is. We're going to go to our royal reporter now, Cameron Walker, who joins us to give us the latest on what he's seeing. Cameron, thank you very much for joining us. I assume, I can hear it already actually, the atmosphere there must be great despite the weather. It's a real British spirit of let's make do with what we've got, isn't it?
Yeah, the atmosphere, Darren, is definitely electric here. Luckily, it stopped raining before the Platinum Jubilee pageant got underway. I can see lots and lots of bikes at the moment. It's the first bit of the not Queen and Country. It's the first bit of a Time of Our Lives part of the Platinum Jubilee pageant. But before this bit started, we had the for Queen and Country section, which was showing the relationship between Her Majesty the Queen and her armed forces. 1,000 of armed personnel took part from the Royal Navy, Royal Air Force and British Army. But this part we're on now is meant to signify Her Majesty's 70 years of service. So we will see things from 1952, when Her Majesty ascended to the throne, right up until present day. So expect vintage cars, expect vintage bikes, as you can see now, and also perhaps we are expecting Ed Sheeran to be performing a little bit later on. He's going to be giving a tribute to Her Majesty's late husband, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who will be singing his song Perfect for that. When this act is finished, we have Act 3, and that's called Let's Celebrate, and that is a massive carnival procession. You can hear the crowds cheering, they're very much loving it, and we can expect to see a 21-foot dragon puppet, which with a wingspan spanning the entire length of the Mall, and the Mall is 20 metres long, so that gives you a bit of an idea of just how big that is. There's also performers from right across the UK. I know for a fact there's performers from Bristol, from Somerset and the Isle of Wight as well, just to name a few, as well as 72 primary schools from up and down the country. They'll be waving flags along the route from Whitehall up the Mall to here at Buckingham Palace, where I'm stood. And then the final act is called Happy and Glorious, and that will have lots of national treasures from British sports, from British celebrity performing and paying tribute to Her Majesty the Queen, and we're expecting Ed Sheeran to sing the national anthem. There's members of the royal family in the royal box just over to my left-hand side. The Prince of Wales is there, the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Her Majesty the Queen is not there. Wow, there's a lot of good pictures going on here, I can just see. And if you are a radio listener, go onto our social media channels and then you can see all of the wonderful British showmanship that's going on around the Queen Victoria Memorial. But as I was saying, when that all finishes, we might perhaps see Her Majesty the Queen appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace one final time to round off her Platinum Jubilee bank holiday weekend, celebrating 70 years of service.
How will the pageant bring in influence from the Commonwealth? Incredibly important, as you've been rightly suggesting throughout the weekend, incredibly important to Her Majesty the Queen and to everything she holds dear throughout her time on the throne.
Yeah, you're right. Her Majesty is head of the Commonwealth, and it's her expressed wish. And at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, actually, in 2018, it was decided that Prince Charles, her son, when Her Majesty is no longer with us, will be the next head of the Commonwealth. And in that first part of the Platinum Jubilee pageant, we saw many armed forces from Commonwealth nations. We saw personnel from Australia, from Canada, from New Zealand as well, and other parts of the Commonwealth. And actually it was in part of the Commonwealth at the time, in 1947, when Her Majesty the Queen was just Princess Elizabeth, in her birthday speech when she was 21 years of age, and she declared before us all that her whole life, whether it's long or short, should be devoted to the service of us, her people, throughout Britain and indeed the Commonwealth. And you know, 70 years later, Darren, more than 70 years later, that's definitely very much on show today. And these cars look magnificent, if I do say so myself.
It's real British heritage, isn't it, coming through there?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, this entire section of the pageant is kind of spanning and showcasing Her Majesty's 70 years on the throne. I mean, I'm not a car expert by any stretch of the imagination, but these look like cars from the 1950s or perhaps the 1960s, when Her Majesty the Queen ascended to the throne, and then, of course, her coronation as well in June 1953. 3, and you know, it's been we just had the before Darren, your show started, during Nigel's show, we had the Golden State carriage drive past us, which was the carriage which she rode when she had been crowned in Westminster Abbey after her coronation, and she rode in that carriage from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace, and Her Majesty has spoken in the past and said that that carriage is an incredibly uncomfortable ride. It's only sprung on leather, so I don't think she particularly enjoyed sitting in that one. But yes, it's a real kind of throwback to the past, isn't it? But it just shows the best of British, the best of British engineering and the best of kind of British traditions, Darren.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see. Cameron Walker, our royal reporter there, thank you very much for giving us the latest from Buckingham Palace. Now, in the studio, I'm still joined by Dr. Zaria Masani. Zaria, watching that, you get a real sense, don't you, that this country is incredibly united, that this country has such fondness, respect, admiration for Her Majesty the Queen. Republicanism doesn't stand a chance in this country, does it?
No. I mean, I think it is a celebration of great national unity. I think, you know, it comes after Brexit, which also channeled some of that. And I don't know what the Queen's views on Brexit were, but she certainly has been
That's the beauty, though, isn't it? We don't know the Queen's views.
Yeah. Well, we do know her views on the Commonwealth, and it is quite heartening to see most of the Commonwealth rallying in support of this. One notable absence which I've noticed is India, which was one of the, you know, which was the jewel in the crown and led the Republican entry into the Commonwealth with the Queen as head of the Commonwealth. And I'm aware of quite a sort of lot of extreme nationalism and chauvinism in a country like India, which wouldn't be celebrating and hasn't sent a contingent. And I don't know whether they will accept Prince Charles.
Well, gosh, time will tell, time will tell. Dr. Zaria Masani there, thank you for giving us your insight into what's going on. Now, next up, joining me live is Paul Hawkins. Paul, we've got you there on the line. Paul, what's the atmosphere like? Can you hear me?
Darren, the atmosphere here on Whitehall is electric. I'm going to move out of the way, just so I'll keep talking, but just so you can see everything. We've had the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and on each bus there have been celebrities representing the decade. So we've just seen the noughties have just passed us by, and Mo Farah was on the top of that, Deborah Meaden. On the 80s bus there was Gary Lineker, Gary Davis. We saw Timmy Mallet whacking Gary Lineker with a helmet. You can get right up close to this part of the procession, which is called Time of Our Lives. You can see in shot, actually, just coming along here, is the 2010s. I might struggle to name some of the celebrities on top. Let's have a look. I can see Joe Wicks on the top of this bus that's just coming past now. We'll see. We might give him a quick shout, but people are loving the atmosphere along here. Loads of colour. People in a really, really positive frame of mind. They're really enjoying, frankly, this part of the pageant, which is a nod to British culture and music and fashion throughout the decades. So here come the 2010s now. We'll get a little wave from Joe Wicks. Hi, Joe. Hello. Hello. I don't know who that is behind Joe Wicks, but hello. There you go. I'm afraid I was more of an 80s and a 90s person myself, but that gives you an idea of what is going to be coming. In this direction, they're heading actually down Whitehall. When they get to the top, that's Trafalgar Square, then they'll turn left, go through the Admiralty Arch, and then go up Pall Mall, up towards Buckingham Palace, where Cameron is, I believe. So that gives you a flavour of what is coming. And this is only the second part of the pageant, Time of Our Lives. We've still got Let's Celebrate, which is a 12 episodes celebrating the life of Queen Elizabeth. So expect lots of references to corgis and horses. There'll be a nod to her wedding to Prince Philip. There'll be a huge wedding cake that'll be built as it moves along. And then we've got the final bit, which is Happy and Glorious, where Ed Sheeran will be performing live, performing God Save the Queen, and possibly even an appearance from Her Majesty on the balcony. But obviously that's TBC. So we're loving it along Whitehall here at the moment. There's less people in this spot. We can get up right close to the action.
Ask you, Paul, what are the crowd expectations? Have they actually managed to meet expectations given the weather? It's classic Britain, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I know it's classic Britain, but it doesn't matter. That's what we're built for when we're British, aren't we? For unseasonable weather. I have to say, it's dry and it's not cold, so you're winning already. Yes, it's overcast and it's a bit gloomy. It's not sunny like it has been, but it's you know, it's people sit here are in a real positive frame of mind. I have to say, the atmosphere feels very much like the London Olympics in 2012. It's that kind of feel-good positivity about being British and celebrating what our country is about.
Well, Paul Hawkins there, soaking up the atmosphere and indeed the rain for us at GB News. So, Ria, watching those scenes, people do seem incredibly happy, incredibly fortunate, as we've discussed. But I tell you what, putting Gary Lineker up, hey, that's no way to bring people together, is it? He has to be one of the most divisive commentators that the Beeb have got at the minute.
True. I think several of the Beeb's commentators are quite divisive these days. They weren't when I was working for the Beeb. We were much more mainstream.
How long were you at the BBC for, Zaria?
I was a producer for Current Affairs for about 20 years, 21 years.
Yeah?
Yes.
And in that time, how do you think it changed?
It was very white and male when I joined. By the time I left, it was mainly run by women, and there were a lot of black and Asian people coming up through the ranks. So I think it's diversified, which is all to the good. But I think the politics have remained very much left liberal. They were in my time. There was hardly anyone who voted Tory. We all voted Labour and Lib Dem, and I did in those days.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's changed.
No. Well, I've seen lots of minis on the screen there now, Zaria, and they're just next to you for our radio listeners. The Mini Cooper, I mean, come on. It doesn't get much more classic than that. You look at that and you think of Britain straight away.
My first car was a Mini when I went to Oxford, and I sort of used to drive up to London in this rather rattly old Mini. And I had a Mini for about 10 years, actually.
Did you? And
yes.
it
not the same
well.
one.
Right. Oh, OK, right, yeah.
We did
I was going to
move
say,
on.
that's good going, actually. Really good going. Now, of course, the Queen, Zaria, we're just going to move on now. The Queen is the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, and her faith, as you well know, is incredibly important to her. And with it being a Sunday, the Lord's Day, it seems like a good time to discuss that particular theme. I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by Gavin Ashenden, author and commentator and associate editor of the Catholic Herald. He's also former chaplain to the Queen. Gavin, thank you very much for your company. You, of course, as I say, they served Her Majesty between 2008 until your resignation in 2017. I wonder, in that sense, could you just give us an insight into your own experience, into how faith has, it's family faith and a sense of a belief in the importance of freedom, isn't it? That's at the root of what Her Majesty's reign has meant to this nation.
Yes, certainly. One of the interesting things that's happened during my lifetime in the course of her reign, which is about the same, is the way in which some of our culture has changed so drastically. And yet the best bits of our culture, some of the things that made us most successful, particularly a sense of duty and of faith and the freedom of speech, have been embodied by her. And she's become defender of the faith in a way that I think the originators of that idea, which was Henry VIII and the Pope in about 1519, never imagined. Because one of the things the faith stands for today is the primacy of conscience and the importance of being able to talk about what you believe. And Her Majesty has been an exemplary Christian for the whole of her life. She hasn't pushed it down anyone's throats. She simply lived it out. But above all, she's lived it out in terms of values, not being ashamed of it. And the way we've seen that particularly is at a personal level, is in her Christmas speeches, where she's written in a way that's been very powerful and very authentic, and I think has inspired a lot of people who recognise what she was doing.
In her speeches, there is also always an element of her faith that shines through. As you say, not in a very overt, shove it down your throat way, but in a quite simplistic, this is what I believe, this is who I am, and it's quite unapologetic in that sense, isn't it?
It is. It's a great model, really, because if you remember that she's head of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is by no means Christian. It's probably majority Islamic, I would think, but it contains Hindus, Muslims, and a wide variety of different beliefs. And she happily welcomes everyone on the basis of who they are without discrimination. But one of the things that's gone wrong in our culture in the last 30 years is the sense that by being welcoming and non-discriminatory, you somehow have to get rid of the old system. The old system was the platform on which all this inclusion was built, a great hospitality for different views. And she represents that. And she's been able, I think, to show some of the very best of Christianity. And perhaps one of the sad things is it's not easy to see who in the subsequent generations of the royal families or even our political masters and mistresses are going to be able to have that authentic sense of real inclusion that Christianity has produced through European culture.
Gavin, we just watched on the screen there, just before these classic cars came through, some Daleks. Now, I'm assuming that since you left Her Majesty, the Church of England, would you like to exterminate the Church of England, Gavin?
No, I'm extremely grateful. It had me most of my working life, but it's a bit like riding a bicycle. You've got to keep going or you fall off. And I think the problem with the Church of England is it stopped keeping going. It's not being true to its own roots, and that's why a number of people have left. Now, what I'd like the Church of England to do is to rediscover its faith and its courage, but it's got a real problem because as a state church, it's got certain responsibilities towards the state and towards secular society. So you can bridge those so long as the state doesn't diverge too far away from what the church stands for. But just at this moment, that gap between the state and Christian culture is getting so wide that the poor Church of England has to make a decision. It's got to decide either to be true to Christ and true to itself, and if you like, stand up and speak to the culture which is running like a bus down a hill without any brakes, and say, look, come back. This is a bad direction. Only bad things will come. Or it's got to join the bus and go over the cliff edge. And it should seem absolutely obvious that it's not the right thing to do, to jump on the bus and go over
absolutely.
the edge. So what I'd like the Church of England to do is... go on.
A lot of people would agree with every word that you've said there, Gavin. But how do you think faith is being reflected in the pageant today?
I think the fact that the Queen embodies the faith implicitly. I mean, quite clearly there aren't a number of banners saying Jesus loves you, or repent the end is nigh, or go to, or shouldn't you be in church, it's Sunday. But there are different ways of doing the faith than those overt ways. I think first of all, the faith, the way the pageant is working is it's covered all the diversity, and I use the word in the best sense there, not the politicized sense. It's covering all the diversity of our very exotic culture, and that includes Christianity. So the faith is there implicitly, even if it's not explicitly.
Gavin Ashenden there, the former chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen, thank you very much for your time and your insight. Now, I'm back in the studio with Dr. Zaria Masani. Zaria, listening to that and watching those scenes there that we can see on screen, just for my radio listeners, we can see it's a very colourful display. And do you think actually Her Majesty the Queen has enjoyed this part of her role, in which she has, more than anyone else, I think, in this country, managed to actually get an insight into different parts of the world and what goes on elsewhere?
I'm sure she's enjoyed it. And I think on the point of the Queen and Christianity, I think she's gone beyond her faith. She's a sort of mother figure, mother goddess for much of the non-Christian Commonwealth, which is why people in the Caribbean and other parts of Asia and Africa would reverence her who aren't Christian. And I think that will be difficult to replicate with a male heir, because I think this maternal aspect, which the Virgin Mary epitomizes in a religious context, the Queen has made a political symbol of.
Yes, we're just watching John Craven and Esther Ransom dancing away there on the screen. Angela Rippon dancing away, we can see on screen now. Asia, look at that, Zaria. There's some influence coming through from the Commonwealth. Do you... A lot of people have actually said, and certainly there are, I think, left-wing commentators who aren't too happy with this and think actually it's ridiculous largesse and that we should never have spent as much taxpayer money on celebrating 70 years of an unelected head of state. What would your sentiment be towards that message?
I think on the expenditure side, the monarchy has been overall a huge earner of money for the British state. So I don't think that can be an objection. I think for Republicans, clearly this celebration of national unity around a monarchy is not very pleasant. It has also, to some extent, counteracted the kind of republicanism we're seeing in Australia and in parts of the Caribbean. So it has been quite a sort of victory for the Queen in that sense.
Zaria, what's the influence you think we're seeing on the screen right now, just for my viewers?
All right. So, yes, we are seeing... now, I can't tell if they're Indian or Pakistani or British Asian. There could be British Asian, because I don't think India is celebrating, as far as I know.
Yeah. And are you quite sad about that? Do you feel...
yes, in several ways. I think India's been rejecting its British legacies and celebrating its return to Hindu values, which ends up with a kind of chauvinism. So I think India's been fairly absent from this celebration, which is a pity.
And a lot of people would say, well, they've got every right to, Zaria, right? They were enslaved, they might argue, by the British Empire.
Well, I would argue that India was greatly enriched by the British Empire.
Which a lot of people
given a modern
view as
economy.
A controversial view, though,
absolutely,
Zaria.
True. And it doesn't play to extreme nationalism in India, which sees the last 1,000 years as being kind of oppression. Sees nothing positive out of them, either from Muslim rule or British rule.
Yes, yeah. And it's one of those things, isn't it, where, you know, political leanings will dictate what version of the history you wish to paint. But Zaria, you've definitely got the opposite view to, I think, Prime Minister Modi. Now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. After the break, though, we'll be taking you to the street parties in Cornwall and the Midlands to see how they've been celebrating. I'm very jealous. But now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Tamsin.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 3:31. Celebrations are underway across the country on the final day of Jubilee celebrations for the Queen. In central London, a 2-mile-long carnival procession has begun, involving some 10,000 people, as well as the gold state coach which carried the Queen to her coronation. It's hoped Her Majesty the Queen will make an appearance on the palace balcony later to round off the weekend celebrations. Meanwhile, millions have gathered for street parties across the country, with more than 85,000 big Jubilee lunches being held. Many street parties are in full swing, with bunting and dancing well underway. This was in Castle Donington in Leicestershire, just one of many celebrations happening across the country today. Well, meanwhile, Cardiff residents have had the chance to try out some cakes baked by the Duchess of Cambridge and her 3 children, no less. Pictures posted on William and Kate's official Twitter account show Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis baking cupcakes, which have been handed out at a street party today in the city. Well, Wales will be making no concessions against Ukraine as they face off in the World Cup playoffs in Cardiff later. Captain Gareth Bale says he'll make no apology if his squad denies Ukraine its World Cup dreams. The winner of the match will take the final spot in the competition in Qatar later this year. Wales has not played at a World Cup since 1958. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll be back with Darren and Real Britain in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 3:35 and you're back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Now, folks, the weather's been less than ideal, but welcome to Britain, eh? Many street parties are still going ahead. I've got absolute respect and admiration for all of yous. 85,000 big Jubilee lunches going on. I tell you what, I wouldn't like to be doing the washing up after those. But yous are partying in the rain, and I cannot imagine anything more British than that. Our GB News reporters have been following these events all over the country. Joining me from Castle Donington now is the GB News East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, and Jeff Moody, our South West reporter in Dartmouth. Hello to the two of you. Will, can I start with you? People have braved the rain. Have you got as many numbers as you expected?
Good afternoon, Darren. Yeah, you're talking about Real Britain. I don't think you can get anything much more British than this. A street party. They're playing the Grease medley in the background, one of those brass bands. And of course, it is raining. It wouldn't be a Jubilee party without a little bit of a rain. It wouldn't be a Jubilee party without a few flags and a few people that will stick around, even if it is raining. We've got Jill here and we've got Julia here as well, neighbours. You're here a little bit further away, right down the end. You can see that people are starting to turn away, but you're here. Why are you still here at this time?
Because it's an historic event and I actually want to sing Sweet Caroline.
Is that the last song that they're going to be playing at the end?
Well, we were supposed to do it at 3:15, but never mind. Yes, I think it's the end.
I think it does feel like this is the end of the day a little bit. The rain's coming in a little bit, but the spirits have been so high. What's made this such a special day today?
Just spending time with friends and having a bit of a laugh. I think it's really good.
It's really nice to see you out here with Julia. Julia, your neighbour here. What does it mean to actually be out here with your friends, with family, with other people from Castle Donington and celebrate 70 years of Her Majesty's reign?
Well, she's been the only monarch we've known of our age group. So what a wonderful woman she is. And it's lovely to celebrate with friends and family. COVID has brought back the community spirit to us. Definitely, and it's lovely to celebrate with people that we know.
And Castle Donington, 1,000 people, probably more, came out to celebrate this. There's only 7,000 people or so that lives here.
Yeah.
What examples does this set to other communities in Britain when people feel like they don't talk to their neighbours in the same way?
Well, I think the reason that has happened is because of work examples. People have had to go out to work to earn. Community's been lost through that. And COVID, an unfortunate event, has brought people back together again. I think it's been it's been the silver lining to COVID. Yeah.
I think 70 years, it's a momentous occasion. This is the end of this street party. We hope that we'll see many more years of the Queen's reign. Do you reckon we can get to 100 years with our Queen?
I would hope so.
Yeah,
I really would. She's such a special lady. And I loved watching her playing with Paddington Bear, the marmalade sandwich. I mean, what a woman to do that sort of thing. And Craig, when she went off with in 2012 and jumped out of the helicopter, so to speak, I mean, she's just got such a sense of humour.
And that's what we need at this sort of time, celebrating, leading the country, but also able to take a joke.
Absolutely, she's a wonderful woman and an example to everyone of how you should behave towards your fellow man.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic to talk to you as well here in Castle Donington. I think that is the last time you're going to be coming to us in Castle Donington. The party is just about to end. Somebody said, how much longer are you planning on staying for? Because we are going to start wiping down tables soon. Just over there, it's getting a little bit empty. Let's just take one last look here in Castle Donington. These fantastic people have been celebrating all day long. 1,000 of them celebrating the Platinum Jubilee. Darren, it's a sight that you won't ever see again in many people's lifetimes. I don't think ours either.
Beautiful scenes there, and it looks like it's doing fantastic stuff for hospitality. But we're going to go now to our GB News Southwest reporter, Jeff Moody, who's in Dartmouth. We're not going to Jeff. We've got Jeff back. Come on, let's bring Dartmouth to real Britain. Hiya, Jeff. Jeff, what's the scenes like there? Oh, I can see some dancing going on. That looks quite the sight. Oh, Jeff's frozen. Right, we're going to Zaria. Zaria, watching the scenes there, people dancing around, people really happy. And actually, I think what the lady said to Will Hollis, our reporter there, about post-pandemic, people have been locked away in their houses, rightly or wrongly. You know my view on that. And I actually think she's right, that people feel incredibly happy to be able to gather with friends, family, communities, and actually share this moment with each other.
Absolutely. It has been an explosion of celebrations and people getting together, which, as you say, for the last 2.5 years, we haven't been able to do or felt free to do. So it's all this pent-up energy. I think there would have been huge celebrations anyway for the Queen's 70 years, and I'm afraid we are not going to have another Jubilee for certainly probably not in my lifetime, and possibly not in the Queen's. So I think it's sort of quite understandable that people are celebrating, and I think it's also understandable that people who are Republicans, like possibly Jeremy Corbyn and his friends, would not be celebrating.
So, Ria, as a historian, though, how do you think this Jubilee will actually go down in the history books? Just quickly, if you would.
I think it will be seen as a major kind of point of unity for Britain, a major positive event in what is sometimes seen as going downhill after leaving the EU. I think this very much affirms British identity and the fact that, people have this enormous optimism about the future, because the Queen has, really conveyed that in her messages, that the future, her future successors, the future of the monarchy, the future of the country.
Beautifully put, Zaria. I couldn't agree with you more. But now let's head back to Buckingham Palace, where our royal reporter, GB News' very own Cameron Walker, joins us now. Cameron, what's the latest?
Darren, it is very loud here at the Platinum Jubilee pageant here in central London, showcasing Her Majesty the Queen's 70-year reign, and it's spanning from 1952 all the way up to present day. Now, we've had the military part of the pageant. We're now on to a section called Time of Our Lives, or I believe actually that's just about to finish. But we have had we've been having dancers in retro clothing from the 1950s, 60s, 70s. We've had a whole host of celebrities on double-decker buses, and each double-decker bus represents a decade of Her Majesty's reign, and there's pictures of Her Majesty painted onto that double-decker bus. I've seen Catherine Jenkins, I've seen Cliff Richard, I've seen the Teletubbies, I've seen Basil Brush. There's been a lot going on here. There's singers and performers still going on. There's even been Paddington Bear. And then, of course, Her Majesty last night did a whole comedy sketch with Paddington Bear during the Platinum Jubilee concert. So this pageant goes on till about 5 p.m. We're expecting Ed Sheeran to perform at some point. He'll be performing both the national anthem as well as a tribute to Her Majesty's late husband, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. And perhaps we may even get one final balcony appearance from Her Majesty the Queen at Buckingham Palace behind me. But for now, I'll hand back to you, Darren, because it's getting incredibly loud and we need to watch the next section. So speak soon.
Thank you, Cameron Walker. That's our royal reporter there, giving us the latest from Buckingham Palace. Now, Zaria, watching those scenes, and I've just clocked a tweet here by Nadine Dorries, the Secretary of State for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and she says, Daleks and Basil Brush driving up the Mall, only in Britain. That's got to be right, isn't it?
It is, because it also indicates a certain British sense of humour, that you could have, figures like that in addition to all the rather pompous figures that go with a royal celebration. And I think that's the genius of the Queen, that she's epitomised this combination of great solemnity and majesty with actually showing she has a very human side, and the witticism of the Paddington Bear episode. So I think this is remarkably British. I think, Britain has, I think, probably the world's best sense of humour and sense of irony, and I think that comes through.
What you said before really struck me, though, when you said that post-Brexit, there's been this idea that Britain's had its day. Britain is a failing power, a falling power. But this is watched, beamed around the world, Zaria. I've just been out there and it was playing on American networks. The world is watching right now. Isn't that a sign of Britain's... It might not be this sort of empire superpower, but we are certainly a soft power superpower.
Absolutely, and I think the monarchy is a huge asset in that, because much of the world, even if it's got republican forms of government, is quite monarchical in certain ways. The Americans love pomp and ceremony, so do the French, so do other republics. So it's an excuse for them to celebrate someone else's monarchy, even though they don't have one themselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a mistake. I'd rather have Her Majesty the Queen than President Biden, I'll tell you that much for free, Zaria.
Absolutely. Maybe we should reverse the American War of Independence.
Well, we're looking at these sites now where the pageant, you can see these beautiful, vibrant images coming through. And actually, look at that Union Jack. One thing I found really, really heartening is seeing the Union flag flown without a care in the world, because I think far too often over recent times, there have been attempts to try and actually denigrate what that flag stands for. Zaria, I've said on this show before that the flag that we can see on screen that my grandfather fought under in the Korean War, the values that flag represents, right? Freedom, democracy, and all of these really important key tenets. I'm really proud to fly that flag. I don't know about you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think most people have been very proud to fly those flags. I mean, we also, a lot of people have put up Ukrainian flags in the last few months, because one of the things Britain has shown a great lead in with its soft power and its hard power is backing Ukraine against the invasion it's suffering. So I think we have a lot to celebrate with the Union Jack. I have seen tweets somewhere, likening this to Hitler's Nazi celebrations, with lots of swastikas around. Yes. And I think it's just plain silly, because, flags per se are not something to be shunned. It depends what flag you're flying.
Well, it depends what it represents as well. And Nazism represented a unique evil around the world, whereas the United Kingdom's flag, as you just said, as far as the Ukrainian example is concerned, Ukraine are incredibly proud to have Britain as a friend and ally in what the atrocities that are taking place in Ukraine as we speak.
Yeah, well, they've said so, that, you know, Britain leads the sort of allies. I think Zelensky was, you know, his first appearance in any parliament was in the House of Commons here. And Britain has led the support for Ukraine and is continuing to do so. So I think Britain epitomises, you know, coming to the rescue of the underdog, which is a very British thing, the sympathy with the underdog. I think so. I think there's a lot to celebrate without being in any way racist.
We're seeing on screen medieval knights here galloping away there on valiant steeds. I'm not sure they're real valiant steeds, mind Zaria, but they're doing a very good job. And the crowds, I'm really impressed by the numbers. And that just goes to show, right, people aren't going to be put off by the weather in this country. We're used to it. And actually, it couldn't get more British than that, could it, if it's raining cats and dogs?
Yes. Well, fortunately, it hasn't been cats and dogs in London, and Thursday and Friday were very good.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's been, you know, it's been a British mix, and I quite like the British weather. I think it's temperate, it's not sort of unpleasantly hot, and I think people enjoy themselves.
Well, Zaria, it's not unlike the British people, right? We all like a whine and a moan, like the weather. Now, that was the author and historian Dr. Zaria Masani, who joins me in the studio. We're going to go back now to Paul Hawkins for the latest where he's at of the pageant. Paul, what's it like?
Yeah, hi Darren. Yeah, we're on Whitehall. This is the Let's Celebrate part of the pageant, where we're celebrating the life of Queen Elizabeth II. So as you can see here, I think this bit is about the parade bit here that's got the stalls that have got faith written on. So I can see there in the distance what looks like a small Sikh temple, it looks like. So there are the different faiths moving down here, and we've just had a huge stall that moved past playing Celebrate Good Times with jubilation written on it. In fact, if you just have a look into the distance, there it goes, sailing down Whitehall. We're near the start of the pageant, so you're going to see all this stuff making its way up Pall Mall in just a moment. And here they come as the representatives of the different faiths of the UK. This bit of the pageant, as I say, it's called Let's Celebrate. So it's celebrating Queen Elizabeth's life in 12 episodes. And then after this moves through, we'll have the final bit of the pageant, which is called Happy and Glorious. That'll be at Buckingham Palace, where Ed Sheeran's going to sing God Save the Queen. But everyone here in a really, really good mood. Lots of smiles, lots of colour, lots of celebration.
Beautiful scenes that we're seeing on screen right now of that medieval procession there walking through. But Paul, what time can we expect Mr. Sheeran? What time's he going to belt out the national anthem?
Well, not sure about the precise timings, but it's 3:51. This is making it through now. One would have, I don't know, sometimes sort of nudging towards 5 o'clock. One would have thought we get to see Ed Sheeran, and potentially, I don't know if the Palace, Cameron will know, but more about this than me, or maybe even you where you are. But as far as I know, they're still saying that the Queen might appear on the balcony briefly. So obviously that would be the highlight of the day if Her Majesty does make it out there.
Always fantastic to see Her Majesty the Queen on the balcony. Paul Hawkins there, GB News' very own. Cheers for keeping us updated. Now, Zaria, watching those scenes there, Her Majesty the Queen on the balcony, that's what people are gathered on the Mall for, at Buckingham Palace, outside Buckingham Palace. That's what it's all about, isn't it? The sight of someone who we all hold so dear in our hearts.
Absolutely, and clearly there is hope that she'll appear today, and we're grateful for the fact that she was able to appear on Friday, and sad that she couldn't attend the St. Paul's service on Saturday because, given her Christian faith, it would have been important to her. So one is worried about these mobility problems that she seems to have from time to time, which seem to stop her.
But I mean, Zaria, it's going to happen to all of us, right? She's 96 years old. I think people often forget that, right? Yeah, 96, it's a grand old age.
Well, her mother, carried on till a very, for another decade. Hopefully the Queen will.
Yes, I hope she goes on and on and on. We're now seeing doves on screen there, which is quite I mean, all of this, Zaria, must have taken absolutely ages to put together. The last 4 days, I think, have been phenomenal. And as you say, that pomp and ceremony, no one, in my opinion, does it quite like us. There is a rich seam of history, of tradition, soaked in British culture, and I think it's something to be incredibly proud of. And as I say, I keep harking back to this, but I just think it's so incredibly important to mention that there have been many who have tried to tell us that what we have here in Britain isn't worth a damn. Yeah, we might as well join the European Union, sign ourselves up and say to hell with British culture and British tradition. This, to me, speaks volumes as to why it's so important that we protect what it means to be British.
Absolutely, and we saw something similar a decade ago with the London Olympics, where again the Queen made this rather amusing appearance, and I think what it does show is the immense ability to organise, but also in a way that is completely different from the way that Nazi pageants, for instance, were organised.
Which is what some pockets of the left have been comparing this all to, haven't
Absolutely, because this has got humour, it's got creativity, it's got all sorts of popular culture. It's not an elitist celebration at all.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the most beautiful elements of all of this for me. You've got people across the political spectrum, you've got people who are well off, the least well off in society, all coming out, all in celebration for Her Majesty the Queen as our head of state, and I think it's been absolutely beautiful. But Dr. Zaria Masani, I have loved having you in the studio with me to document all of this and to actually talk us through what's been going on screen. We've got flamingos on screen now, so that strikes me as the most vibrant way to actually celebrate the Queen. What do you think that'll be actually signifying there, Zaria, with the flamingos?
I think it's celebration of the environment.
So not the cocktail you'll be having after the show, Zaria?
No, but certainly something very dear to the Queen's heart, because, it's something she cares deeply about.
Indeed, yes. Well, and we're seeing on screen there more colour, more vibrancy. It's really beautiful, actually. But stay with GB News. We're going to be documenting all of this. But you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers for your company, as ever. The show's on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, folks, let's check the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking cloudy for many, with outbreaks of thundery rain possible for some. Let's take a look at the details. In the southwest of England, a band of heavy and possibly thundery rain will affect the parts of North Devon and Somerset, much clearer and drier further west. In the southeast of England, it'll remain rather overcast this evening, and some heavy, possibly thundery showers may affect western areas for a time. In South Wales, there's a thunderstorm warning in force this evening, so there could be some spray on the roads and sudden downpours. In the Midlands, it'll be a murky evening, drizzly for some, but across more southern areas, there's a risk of some heavy or thundery showers later on. Further north, in northeast England, there'll be a lot of cloud around this evening, especially over any hills, where it's likely to be a little damp, and some may catch a shower elsewhere. For southern Scotland, it'll remain dry for the evening, though it'll be a bit cloudier than the rest of the day. Best chance of sunshine is in more northern areas. In Northern Ireland, it'll be a bit mixed. Eastern areas will start to see the rain and cloud arrive, whereas western areas will hold on to the fine weather. Through the rest of the night, it'll remain rather cloudy, and persistent rain will affect parts of Lincolnshire and East Anglia. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't